Hey, welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Brian Christopherson. This Tuesday, BC over there at Nebraska's media session on Tuesday. Plenty of Matt Rhule talk, plenty of just talk in general. What was a non-Matt Rhule thing that stood out? Let's pretend like we can just avoid the elephant in the room all the time and only talk about other stuff that's happening, BC. But what stood out that had nothing to do with Matt Rhule, Penn State? Yeah, we'll start there.
Uh, Dana Holgorsen's always entertaining to me. So like the whole session I always enjoy. It doesn't really matter what the topic is. It switches from all over the place and it still kind of captivates me. So like when he talks about the screenplay that they've scored, touchdowns on 2 weeks in a row and really how it fits like Justin Evans and Lyndon Meyer, like sort of nowhere to find defenders on that particular play, but also how Nyziah Hunter is like built to be like that type of screen guy. That's really interesting to me. Like he says, I've had really, really good wide receivers before that aren't like good screen guys like that. And he mentioned Tavon Alston. I hate to throw him under the bus, but he said it, not me. And he said he was a great, great receiver, but he sucked at those screens. He said he sucked. Nyziah, that's why I like listening to him because he says sucked a few times at every press conference. But Nyziah, I think we've seen has that like that physicality, and I think he's been even more than they suspected. Like they knew when they were looking at him in the portal, like he could go get contested catches and all that stuff. But just his speed, how he pulls away from guys. I mean, we saw it with the one shoe, but it really looked on Saturday from the box. I don't know how it seemed on TV, but that they had a good angle on him on that long touchdown, and he just pulled away, and it wasn't even really close. No one even really had to dive at his shoes at the end of it. So that was interesting. Also, he talked a little bit about Emmett Johnson and just how confident he is right now, but also kind of revisited like last December when he was briefly like maybe a portal guy. And they had 2 or 3 conversations, and Dana was like, "Man, I'm coming back here. I need you back here. You're expecting you." And they both agreed, like, "Hey, we're gonna make this thing go in a good way, and you're gonna be a big part of it." And he said Emmett is just his kind of back, just the way he does things. So as much as we've sometimes talked about what Nebraska doesn't have at running back, or like what we think they need as like the backup, they love their RB1, and it's hard not to after his last game, which I thought was by far the best of his career.
Yeah, going back to the Hunter thing, I said this on the message board in the game thread as it happened, and I truly believe this. He doesn't look outwardly fast. Like when you're watching him run, he's not like this glider. It's not like this, long stride. There's not minimal effort. I don't know what it is. The way he runs makes it look like he's slow, and yet at the same time, no one is like near him, so
Yeah.
he's not slow. It's like a very weird distinction that makes him kind of stand out to me because I just don't think fast when I think of Nyziah Hunter. I think explosive, which to me are two different things because it feels like when he catches the ball, he's immediately looking to get upfield and he's not worried about trying to weave through contact. Like he's not worried about that. He's just ready to go. It's just that when he's in the open and running, I'm never just like, oh man, that's one of the fastest guys on Nebraska's team. But he very well could be. It's one of those things where it just aesthetically looks so different than like when Ja'Cory Barney is streaking in the open field or Emmett Johnson streaking in the open field. It just seems different with Hunter, and I don't know why that is. It is sort of fascinating that he's developed this niche as a tunnel screen guy because one of the things with Ja'Cory Barney, you would think he'd be a better screen player than he has been, and it hasn't quite worked out that way. And I almost wonder if some of it is when you're the other team, you're not like preparing. I think now they probably will be, but you're not preparing for Nyziah Hunter to beat you on a screen pass so much as, hey, this guy can get over the top, this guy's got body control, this guy can play over the middle, and now all of a sudden he can add to it. He can just run 2 yards, turn around, then here comes a couple offensive linemen, and he's gone. And so it certainly makes him a very interesting player overall as a wide receiver. And it feels like we can have this conversation every week because this week it was Ja'Cory Barney who had sort of the quiet day amongst the three. But it really feels like Nebraska doesn't have to have a number one wide receiver because they've got 3 guys that at any point in time can kind of take over a game for them. which is a nice problem to have.
Sometimes the offseason talk is full of tomfoolery. This was right. Like, their receivers are good. Like, they've got good backups too. I mean, those guys are going to be good players in the future, but Nyziah Hunter, I don't think people are sleeping on him, but Dane Key got so much of the attention. And I'll tell you what, teams have to go back and look at like who the portal options were and how some of these guys were ranked amongst the wide receivers. Nyziah Hunter should have been very, very high on that list. He should have been like top.
He was here.
Well, he should have been. He should have been like top 5 nationally among available receivers. When you think about, he had like 500 yards of offense as a redshirt freshman at Cal. So if you've got a guy, and I know things switch year to year, you got to try to keep guys, but you got a guy with 3 years of eligibility still who's just starting to scratch the surface. He was such a steal for Nebraska. I mean, obviously you get something out of it. It's not for free, but he's been everything you hope. And you know what? Dane Key has been really solid too. Like, I know like a lot was made of the Michigan State game where he didn't have a catch, but he was still getting after it as a blocker. And then you brought him here to make a catch like he made to win a game on Saturday. And he went up and got it one hand. And also, I'll tell you what, he had that 16-yard catch when it was like 2nd and 16. That was not an easy play. And he got drilled on a couple of the plays right around there. So I thought he had a really strong fourth quarter.
Yeah, there was a moment there where I thought Nebraska might be without him because he had the wind knocked out of him.
Yeah.
There's that tip ball, and you couldn't really tell on the broadcast. And all of a sudden, he's like on the ground. And it looked like his hands were on his head. And it's like, did the Maryland defender just cheap shot the hell out of him here? Which is not what happened. There's just a tip ball, and you hit a guy because a tip ball, you get a free hit. And he just got hit directly in the stomach, and so he needed to catch his wind back. And then he was fine after that. And he had the big catch at the end of the game to win it for Nebraska. And so I'm looking here. Have you do a better job of this than I do? I don't always go look at Nebraska's stats after each week. Have you looked at how tightly grouped it is between Hunter, Barney, and Dane Key at this point in time with yardage, receptions, and all of that?
I wrote it down. I wish I had it in front of me right now.
Yeah, I can rattle it off. I mean,
Okay,
Nyziah Hunter has 415 yards on 22 catches. He's got the 3rd most receptions on Nebraska's team. Can you name who's in front of him without thinking about it too hard?
Barney's got like 26, right?
Yes, Barney's 26. He leads the team. Who's second?
Is it Emmett? Is Emmett second now?
Emmett Johnson's second with 24 catches, 130 yards. Nebraska's certainly utilizing him more in the passing game than what he had at other points in his career. Hasn't been as effective. I would also sort of point that out too. He had, 39 catches for 286 yards a year ago. So he's getting more average on those catches. I mean, his average number's down a little bit here. But the point that I'm trying to make is between these 3 receivers, you got Hunter at 415, Barney at 364, leading the team with 26 catches. Dane Key's tied for the team lead with touchdowns of Hunter, 269 yards on 20 catches. You still have Luke Lindemeyer at 19 catches for nearly 200 yards and Emmett Johnson at 24 catches for 130. That's really balanced. I mean, you've got 5 guys that are within 7 catches of each other. And I don't know that we thought it was going to be as balanced as this for Nebraska's offense, but I think that's part of why they can be so effective. You can't just take any one guy away and watch everything sort of fall apart. They've got multiple people here that can sort of hurt you. And then they have guys, Cortez Mills has 138 yards. Isaiah Mosey has 103 yards. Quinn Clark still has 58 yards, Heinrich Harburg, 51 yards. I mean, Mekhi Nelson, 48 yards. So it goes down the list from there. And it just, a pretty spread out, balanced attack for Nebraska passing the ball. When you brought up Hunter, I wanted to go look at this, and I've just been impressed by how Nebraska sort of has turned this into a very difficult, I think, to slow down the offense as a whole, because even if Dane Key goes catchless against Michigan State, they still put up 30-some points. I mean, I guess 31 offensively.
I think that's what Dana would say. That's what I do. I think he's like He's a guy who's like, spread it around, make them think about like 6, 7 different guys. You guys can all get caught up in is the run game good enough? How would you grade it situation? And like, I just need, however I can get the ball to guys in space, running, passing, whatever. You have to do it. But he did talk, in fairness, he did talk about the commitment to the run game and this past weekend, and basically looking at it. And this is kind of what I think we thought going in. He saw those Maryland rush ends, which were really good, of course, at getting to the quarterback. But I think they saw within that something they could attack. You have 2 freshmen there. So you've got guys who are 3 years older than them. You'd hope you could kind of man them up a little bit, use a little old man strength and move them a little. And they did. And they were just so confident running the ball off the bat that I think that's going to be a big shot in the arm for not just Emmett, but that O-line. But you're right. The ball's getting spread around. Here's a stat. Halfway through the season, it's the first time the Huskers have had 3 receivers with at least 3 touchdowns since 2015. That's the full season of 2015. So, wow. I mean, they're obviously they're finding guys, at least they're getting them to the paint in a much more varied way than they have in the past.
Did Dana get into red zone conversation much? Obviously, that's sort of a topic around here, given that Nebraska's struggles inside the red zone, finishing drives with touchdowns, that sort of thing.
He didn't talk about the red zone. So that could be, I'll point the thumb. I was kind of typing fast about what he was saying, and I don't even know that I asked Dana a question today, but he didn't get into that. It was a lot of Emmett, a lot of Nyziah. On the other side, John Butler, it's been said or reported, I think this is from the PFF stats, that like Williams Nwaneri had 8 quarterback pressures. It's kind of interesting. John Butler's like, yeah, that doesn't really mean a lot to me. Like, he counts quarterback hits. That's what counts. And he said a goal is to have at least 5 of them. And he had Nebraska with 1. So clearly that wasn't good enough. One thing he wants to see improve is when they're around the quarterback, they've got to finish some of these off. And I mean, obviously this goes back weeks from the beginning with Sorsby, but Childs was a great example a couple weeks ago. And you saw that with Malik Washington. There were a few times when they had a chance to close in on him, and they just couldn't get home. I do think the end of that game was encouraging when they had to have it. They had like 4 passes that he counted where they made him get off time and throw it a little earlier on that like last series or so. And in fact, if they had not disrupted him, as you guys saw in the TV copy, I didn't know it till later, they had that guy wide open. It might have been a touchdown with a minute left. And imagine how different our conversation would be right now.
Yeah, well, that's the fine line between, winning and losing right there. The Williams Nwaneri thing was interesting because I saw that going around, and in my head, I was like, I can think of the one play at the end where he's right in the face of Malik Washington, who made just a tremendous pass over the middle of the field there. Other than that, Nebraska did not get that much in terms of pressure on Malik Washington throughout the game. And so I'm not surprised that John Butler would be a little bit disappointed in that. They're going to have an ample opportunity with Drake Lindsey coming in, Nebraska going there on Friday. Drake Lindsey is a guy that has thrown the ball a lot for Minnesota. This is not your Mo Ibrahim Minnesota. This is not they're just going to try to grind it out running game Minnesota. They've been throwing the ball a lot more. I think they trust Drake Lindsey quite a bit, and he's been putting the ball up there a lot. I mean, he threw it 40-plus times, I believe, against Purdue here this past weekend. I would imagine he's going to be in the 30s again against Nebraska should game flow and overall plays allow. And so they're certainly going to have an opportunity to get after a quarterback yet again and kind of show that, they made Maryland's offensive line look really, really good. And Maryland's kept Malik Washington clean. And so I think that should be, lauded just on what the Terps have done. But Nebraska also turned that Maryland offensive line into a bunch of road graders that maybe isn't a true statement either. They don't need to do the same with a Minnesota team that's not as good up front, or certainly hasn't been this year.
Yeah. And John Butler said, you're right. Like Drake Lindsey they have thrown the ball more than we're used to Minnesota doing that. But I think he fully expects that the Gophers will try to test the run defense. And he actually had a line like, why would you not? it's the bit. I mean, they know that it's
look at what Maryland did. They averaged like 60 yards in conference play and then doubled it when playing Nebraska this last weekend.
The third quarter was pretty discouraging, and then it flipped a little bit. But that third quarter, before McCullough busted through on that 3rd and 2, they were leaning on Nebraska on that series, and it felt like it could be like one of the a real damaging portion of the season if they just kept that going. So I could argue that McCullough honestly made the play of Nebraska's season so far when he busted through on that one. But yeah, they've got to step up and be stiffer against the run like they were against Michigan State. I thought that was encouraging, and then I thought they kind of took a half step back this last game.
Yeah, and you wonder if some of that was just something Maryland found and was aggressively attacking, if some of that was just being on the road, what that is, but they'll have another opportunity with Minnesota this weekend. All right, I mentioned I didn't want to get into the Matt Rhule talk, but obviously that was going to come up here, and I thought it was interesting. Dylan Raiola, did he take it upon himself? Was that one of the first things that he was asked? How set the stage, because that's just going to make its way around. I was over at our Penn State board, just before we started this, and they were discussing Patrick Mahomes having thoughts on their job opening, because that clip has already made its way over there.
Yeah, it was at the very end of his press conference. It wasn't like a hot topic today. Holgorsen was asked about it, and Dylan was asked about it. And it was because Dylan on Instagram posted on Monday, Nebraska head ball coach, picture of him and Rhule, and it had the lock symbol, like he's here. And so he basically confirmed through his own words, like he ain't going anywhere is what he said. He kind of played, I think they mean it, but it's a kind of funny, like, he said Julie doesn't want to go anywhere. She's got this business and all this stuff. And Rhule had kind of mentioned that the other day, like my wife makes a decision on where we live, sort of thing. So that was it. But yeah, he definitely seemed confident in confirming, that's exactly what my social media post meant the day before. I expect him to be here, and basically that it hasn't been a distraction. We're as dialed in, or he's as dialed in as he's ever been. And Dana Holgorsen said the same thing. He said, of course, Dana's been through it himself and can go through it still as a coordinator. He's a guy of interest to people, I'm sure. Said that Rhule's a pro at it. Of course, Rhule's been through it a bunch of times. He knows how to handle that speculation. He said if you let that become a distraction, or you take your eye off your team for that, you're just doing a disservice to them. And he knows that Rhule is not. And so I think within their walls, it's actually not an elephant in the room. I think they talked about it Sunday, and it's just like they think they know what is going to happen on that. Nothing. I think that's what they think, and it very well could be the case. And they're just proceeding like let's go win an important game on Friday.
Do you anticipate this being a distraction for Nebraska, or do you think that they have, because they sort of seem like they've confronted it head on, this allows them to kind of move forward, because there's still 6 games to be played. And right now they're 5-1, and they have an opportunity to stack more wins than we've seen around here in a little while.
I got the sense that Rhule, and you would expect this because of kind of how he is, was pretty straightforward with him Sunday. That's what it seemed like. And I think Raiola kind of serves as like a spokesperson probably for how the team took that information, like how they believe this isn't a thing. That doesn't mean people are going to stop talking about it or whatever. But if your team buys in and is totally like, I don't see this as a storyline, whatever they're saying is nuts. I heard it from the man himself. This is what he told us. Like, then I don't expect it to be a distraction. It's sort of like one of those things where you're just like, let's go play now. So, and also I always sense that the guys like that play don't get as caught up in it sometimes as everybody else. Like they're able to just like process it. Like I don't think this is a story. I'm moving on to the next thing. I got to move on to the next thing. And I think that's what's happening over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll
I mean,
see.
at some point you have to go out and perform well, or want to go out and perform well, probably because you're a competitor. But also, it's a series of job interviews for these players too in the portal era. I mean, they could be putting tape out there for a different coach or for Matt Rhule or whatever it is. So it's just a different overall time period than even just a few scant years ago. Like all of this is just handled so differently. All of these job openings being available, starting in September, and now we're in October, and there's still a handful of coaches out there that are on the hot seat. It makes for kind of a shift in how this all used to be. You used to not see this until November, and now it's happening in September and October with regularity at this point.
Yeah, I think the main thing from Rhule that I got yesterday, I said it on the other things, but I'll just reiterate it because I think it was the biggest takeaway was when he was asked about just sort of the investment in the program. And he had that quote about, it's a world of $30-40 million rosters. I'd like to see us do the same thing. And he mentioned that sometimes that's not the Nebraska way or whatever that's thought of. And he's like, I'd like it to be. So I just think that was like my biggest take is like, maybe that's a little bit of a leverage thing where you're like, let's get a little more into that money pot. Because not only do you have to compete for certain portal guys, which we saw a couple examples where they went different places that Nebraska would have liked maybe, but you also have to try to keep together a roster that I think they really like. As with some of these young players we're talking about, this is very like sophomore class down when you break it down by like their class and all that. So you want to keep it around for another year or two. They have a really hard schedule next year. And so you've got to be loaded up to go after it again. And so that was my biggest take from the whole thing, from what the head man has said. Well, I think some outside our bubble kind of got caught up in little snippets. I love this. I love that. I love Penn State, quote and all that stuff. And I just think that was probably not processing the whole thing at least as much as they should have.
You know what we're going to process, Brian? We're going to process Nebraska's series against Minnesota since they've entered the Big Ten. It has been a up and down period. Nebraska's first game, 2011, they went up into the cities, and it was an important win for the Huskers. It stands out to me as I had gotten the call from Kevin Ryan at 247 Sports the Friday before this game asking if I would be interested in a full-time opportunity to cover Nebraska football recruiting. So it's always synonymous with me for that. That was the sort of the last game before I became a full-time 247 Sports employee. So, for some of you, that's good news. For others of you, probably wished I never got that phone call, but so it goes,
I don't know people say that.
Well, not you.
People, I don't think they say that.
You don't read our YouTube comments a whole lot, do you, Brian?
No.
Never read the comments. Nebraska, Minnesota, I think was 2013 the first time the Gophers won against the Huskers since joining the Big Ten. That game being the famous Taylor Martinez was healthy enough to play. They ran him out there, and then Rashid Hageman just destroyed Mike Mowdy over and over and over on their way to victory.
Yeah.
That sound about right?
34-23. Yeah. Nebraska was smashing them in the Big Ten until then. It felt like the old days, because if you look from 1963 to 2012, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nebraska won like 16 in a row. That included, of course, the famous 84-13 game in 1983.
Yeah, there's some media members that never seem to get over that one based on how Nebraska's received up there in that in that press box. So they win that one. Then they come to Lincoln, and I remember this too because DeMorney Pearsonell actually had a pretty nice game that day. And Jerry Kill's Minnesota Gophers kind of, you could argue this was sort of the game that got Bo Pelini fired.
Yeah. I think so. It was, of course, would have been after the Wisconsin one, but they still had like 2 losses, and they were headed toward a 10-2 if they win that game. And I remember that at the very end, that was one where it was to Pearsonell the ball, and like he kind of Minnesota DB made a great play and kind of got juggled around, and they picked it off inside the 5-yard line. Yeah, it would have been interesting, the conversation over the next week or two of the Pelini era, if there could have been a chance to continue it had Nebraska won that game. I don't know.
It would have put it really, I think, difficult on Sean Eichhorst if Nebraska wins that game. They beat Iowa. You're 10-2, and then are you still making that move? Like, I mean, 9-3. There's a little bit of precedent for, but 10-2 would have been difficult. But we'll never know, as Minnesota won that one, and then Nebraska ripped off a couple wins in 15-16. None of these are particularly memorable to me. I mean, the 2016 game, I want to say that was a Riker Fife start in late November, as Nebraska was just trying to finish out the string on what was a good start to the season and then quickly turned into kind of a season from hell. 2015, I have no frame of reference on at all. That game was out there in Minneapolis. I think Nebraska won it and then came home and promptly lost to Clayton Thorson and Northwestern, scuttling any real momentum they had at that point in time. After that, you get the famous 2017. Bill Moose definitely said or yelled no in the press box.
Oh, no.
Demery Croft had a touchdown run. We used to look up where Demery Croft went and played ball after he left.
That was one of the worst Husker games I can ever remember. 54-21 to a pretty mediocre Minnesota team.
So there are stories out there from former players, and I talked with some of them on this, and I'm not going to name any names, but it sure sounds like the defensive plan that Nebraska put together that whole week was scuttled by one overly enthusiastic defensive coordinator who decided that they would run something else entirely, roughly Saturday morning of the same game that they were playing in. So they spent an entire week practicing one way and then came out in different formations and were completely unprepared to show up and play football against a Minnesota team that wasn't particularly good either, and absolutely put it on Nebraska that day. So that one definitely stands out for various reasons. Nebraska's last win in this series it was Scott Frost's first win as Nebraska's football coach on Saturday, October 20th. The Huskers rolled 53-28. Divino Zigbu had a big game that day. The Gophers then won the next 5 games, the last 4 of which were all one-score games.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these are just mind-numbingly bad losses, in my opinion. Like, there's just varying degrees of it. But, I mean, Nebraska has allowed some very average to bad Minnesota teams just get the best of them by just shooting themselves in the foot so much that it's questionable that they even have a foot anymore. I mean, the 34-7 loss in 2019, that was sheer dominance from Minnesota. Everything since, I mean, you have a Nebraska team that wouldn't run the football against the 50 Gophers that showed up in 2020. You have a Nebraska team in 2021 that just couldn't stay out of its own way in Minneapolis. You remember Jock Yant unable to score from the 1 yard line because he fell down?
Do I ever?
Do you ever? How could you forget Jock Yant? 22, you have just the Chubba Purdy. Nebraska has an early lead. They're just kind of clinging on to this thing, and then they can't get that game finished, and they allow Ethan Kaliak-Manis and Minnesota to leave with the win. And then you have 2023, which I think everyone kind of just remembers all too well, the first game of the Matt Rhule era, and it finishes with a kind of an inexplicable loss with the Anthony Grant fumble, the touchdown from, I can't think of his first name. I think the last name was Jackson, catching it, toe tapping there up in the stadium. And then, famously PJ Fleck, culture over stars was being professed that night.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a bad run, obviously. The thing that always comes to mind is if you go look at where Minnesota stood in a lot of those seasons, PJ Fleck has really used Nebraska as like a trampoline for his team, like each and most every of those years. And some of them, they were in a really kind of precarious spot. Not like he was necessarily in trouble, but it was sort of like some of those Gopher seasons that felt like they could end up like 5-7 or 6-6. And then they would beat Nebraska and it would help them, sort of like Nebraska has done to Iowa too much, get to like that 8-9 win thing. So I've always said, especially you kind of want to control your region first and foremost. Nebraska, by not getting the job done in these situations, has also elevated like sort of borders, not quite border in this case, but those kind of rivals, regional rivals, to spaces they don't need to be in by not handling them. So, I mean, Fleck runs a good program. You got to give them credit. Like they've been pretty consistent. You can not love his style or whatever, but he's been 6-1 against Nebraska. So he knows how to get it done against the Huskers. And I think that the last time Nebraska played there in 23, Rhule's first game, those first 2 weeks, Rhule kind of talked about this week. I think he kind of learned, Schaefer, that like, man, these scars are pretty significant that this like team and fan base has from the past. Like, because it's like it was just his first loss, and it was a real bummer. But you're like, okay, we can get back. Let's go back to work. But I remember in the post game, there was like sort of this weird thing, like, yeah, it's a new start, but it's still attached to like 5 to 6 years past because it just feels the same. And that's sort of like already in people's minds. And they had to really work hard to get past that. And maybe now we're starting to see it with these close wins the last, winning by 3 on Saturday and winning by 3 against Cincinnati. But this would be another good opportunity to end a drought against a team that's in your league, and also, show that you can continue to win. Maybe it's not a close game, but just handle these teams like people want.
Yeah, I do remember a very shell-shocked, not shell-shocked is maybe a little strong, but like Matt Rhule seemed to be relatively puzzled that there was so much vitriol following that loss because of things that had happened before he had ever arrived. It also didn't help that he had called out that Anthony Grant had some issues with ball security and then was in there in the end of that game and everything else. But Nebraska is not the same as its 2023 counterparts. And so this team has shown an ability that when things haven't gone well for the Huskers this season, the resolve has been really strong. They played really well when they've needed to make plays. The defense has shown up and gotten off the field and given the offense opportunities. The offense went and got the necessary points to go beat Maryland this weekend. So you like to see that kind of playing out for Nebraska. You like that this is a team that seems like they're learning how to win. They're learning how to be successful, and that maybe some of these close games – they can start to eliminate some of the stuff that's allowing teams to hang around. I mean, if you don't have the sort of second and third quarters that you do against Michigan State and Maryland, we're talking about a Nebraska team that looks like they've dominated some of these games. Now, they have to go and do that. That's on them to make these mistakes go away or to be better than them. But ultimately, they have an opportunity here in these next couple of weeks with Minnesota and Northwestern against teams that aren't bad by any means, but they're teams that Nebraska should have an opportunity to continue its solid season against. And as long as it can stay out of its own way, are certainly going to be in that game in the thick of it at the end.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked, of course, if this one goes down to the wire too. But if Nebraska has the opportunity on Friday night where they're up 7 or 10, second, third quarter, that step you want to see them take is in that moment. Like, against Maryland, you have that drive where it was 24-14, end of the second quarter, and Raiola didn't throw it away far enough. And you give it away and they get 3, and then you're kind of in a game again. And there was that moment where you probably could have made them realize this isn't going to be our day, like if you go in and score there. And so if they have that opportunity Friday, and they're going to have to earn that first, the right to have that chance, that's where you want to see them just step on the throat, make that play that makes it a 14-point game. And, has the other side like playing uncomfortable from behind and forcing things, and then maybe you can run away with something. So I don't expect that necessarily, but that's what you want to see if they get the chance.
Yeah, and it's almost been kind of a consistent issue for them here in 2025. They weren't able to do that against Cincinnati. They struggled with that against Michigan State to some extent. And then, of course, again, against Maryland, like you said, 24-14 ball at midfield, that needs to be a 3-score game, or, at the very least 13-point game. And they weren't able to get it done. And so we'll see if they get another opportunity against Minnesota this weekend. All right, Brian, anything else you want to discuss here before we depart?
No, I think we covered it. Should be good. We're all going up there, and I don't know. Are we coming back in time to watch some exhibition basketball, or what are we doing?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a discussion as to how early people want to get up and roll
we have
out
a
of the
decision to
cities
make. We have a big
on
decision to
Saturday
make.
morning. So I'm very open to the conversation. So we'll see what our fearless leader Michael Brunts thinks about such a thing. There is something I want to add though. If you are in the Omaha area on Wednesday, if you're listening to this, we're recording here on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we will be at Cross Strain Brewing. And it'll be myself, Brian Christopherson, Michael Brunts, along with Nick Hanley and Grant Hansen of Walnut Media. And we are going to be doing a new event. We'll see how it goes this first time around. Maybe this becomes a regular thing, but a new event called Huskers Live on Tap. And we're going to have an opportunity to be at the brewery there. We're going to have a conversation. The five of us just sort of roundtable style, going through some different things here, discussing Nebraska's 2025 season. Of course, we're going to be discussing Matt Rhule and Penn State. There's no way you can't have that conversation. But we're inviting you, anyone who wants to show up, 5 to 7. You can pop in at any time during that stretch. But from 5 to 7, we'll be there talking Nebraska football, enjoying some of the great beers that Cross Strain has to offer. Of course, the Cornhusker Crusher tied in with the Nebraska Athletics program. But they've got plenty of stuff for whatever style that you're sort of looking for. So we invite you to get down there, join us completely free. You know, the beers cost money. I will say that the beers cost money. If you want food, there's going to be a food truck, but there's going to be some prizes and should be a fun opportunity here to get out and hopefully see some people. So we invite you over there to Cross Train Brewing in Papillion at 5:00 on Wednesday. So we also invite you to check out what we have going on at Husker247.com. We can't promise prizes or, a food truck at Husker247.com. But, if you want to crack open a beer while looking at your computer screen or phone and checking out the great work from Brian Christopherson and Michael Brunts, we certainly appreciate that and understand. So be sure to do that. Check out everything we got going on. Plenty of coverage of all the things surrounding Matt Rhule and Penn State. Plenty of coverage with recruiting going on. We've gotten a little bit of an uptick. Nebraska's 2026 class. We got some things happening. Just had a bit of a primer if you need to catch up on what's happening there as Nebraska looks to close the things out. Brian, it is, I believe, 8 weeks until early signing day. That surprised you at all? Is that like, looking up and realizing, hey, this thing is coming to a close, a class that I haven't probably had to think about for a couple months here?
I didn't realize it was 8 weeks. Yeah, that's different. It's still an adjustment to me that we're doing it this early. But I'm glad you got a primer and all that stuff, because the 26 class is one you can kind of you're like, okay, who again is all attached in this thing? There's been so much 27 and 28 talk for good reason. But yeah, there's always something that sort of switches, and some guy comes on the radar in the last month or so that makes it interesting.
Yeah, and we got that coverage for you over there at Husker247.com. So for Brian Christopherson, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker247. We'll catch you next time.